There is a woman in Kabul who keeps her curtains drawn, not because the view is unpleasant, because habit does not ask permission before it becomes permanent. Her name is Zarghona. She is 71 years old. She has lived through 4 different wars in the same city. She stopped counting which one was which a long time ago. They all felt the same from inside a house with the curtains drawn. If you have ever wondered what it means to grow old inside a country that has been at war for most of your adult life, this is Zarghona's story. Zarghona was born in Kabul in 1954. The Kabul she grew up in was a different city than the one the world came to know later. There were universities, there were women in the streets without coverings, there were cinemas and parks, and an ordinary middle-class life that believed, the way ordinary lives believe, that what was normal would remain normal. Her father was a school teacher. Her mother kept a home that was warm and full of people. Zarghona studied to become a midwife. She wanted to be the first person a new life encountered. She delivered her first baby at 23. She delivered her last at 61. In between, she delivered babies through a Soviet invasion, a civil war, a Taliban regime, and another war after that. Life kept arriving regardless of what was happening outside. The Soviets invaded in December 1979. Zarghona was 25 years old. She was pregnant with her first child. She remembers the sound of the aircraft the first morning, not as something frightening exactly, but as something wrong. The sound of something that should not be in that sky over that city. Her son, Tariq, was born 11 days after the invasion began. She held him in the delivery room and listened to the city outside and understood that the life she had planned and the life she was going to live were now 2 different things. The years of the Soviet occupation settled into the particular exhausted rhythm of a city learning to live around something it cannot remove. As Zarghona kept working, there was no alternative. The need for midwives did not pause for invasions. She delivered babies in apartments with the windows taped against blast. She delivered babies during curfews, traveling to women in labor through streets she was not supposed to be in. She delivered babies in neighborhoods that had changed hands and would change hands again by morning. She memorized the faces of the soldiers at each one. She kept her bag packed at all times. Her husband, Daoud, was a civil engineer. He spent the occupation years doing what engineers do in occupied cities, maintaining the infrastructure that keeps people alive while the infrastructure that kills people operates around it. They did not talk about what they each saw. They came home, they ate, they slept. They kept Tariq's life as ordinary as 2 people can keep a child's life inside an extraordinary situation. Tariq grew up thinking this was normal. That was the point. The Soviets withdrew in 1989. Zarghona was 35 years old. She stood at her window, curtains open just this once, and watched the last vehicles leave the city. She felt something she thought was relief. It was not relief. It was the beginning of what came next. The civil war that followed the Soviet withdrawal was in many ways worse than the occupation. At least during the occupation, you knew roughly where the danger was. The Civil War had no geography. The rockets came from different directions on different days. Neighborhoods that were safe became unsafe. Factions changed allegiances. The city ate itself. Zarghona's neighborhood was shelled in the spring of 1993. Their building was partially destroyed. They moved to her mother's house in a different district. 6 people in 3 rooms. Her mother's hands shaking every time there was a loud sound. Tariq was 13. He had stopped flinching at explosions. That was the thing that frightened Zarghona most. Not that he was afraid, but that he had stopped being afraid in the way that children should be afraid of things that are genuinely dangerous. He had calibrated. He had learned to measure. He was 13 years old and he was calibrating danger. The Taliban took Kabul in 1996. Zarghona was 42 years old. She kept working. Women still needed midwives. Under the Taliban, women needed midwives more than ever because women could not access most other medical care. She kept her head down. She kept her bag packed. She kept going to the women who needed her. She did not think of it as courage. She thought of it as the job. Daoud died in 1998, not from violence, from a heart that had been carrying too much for too long. He was 51 years old. The doctor said cardiac arrest. Zarghona sat beside his bed in the hospital and held his hand and thought about every conversation they had not had, everything they had not said, because there was always something more urgent, and they believed, the way people believe when they are in the middle of things, that there would be time later. There was not time later. There is never time later. She kept working. Tariq married. He had children of his own. He tried to leave Afghanistan several times, once during the Second American War, once after. The first attempt did not succeed. The second did. He is in Germany now. He calls when he can. The calls are shorter than either of them want them to be because the distance makes certain kinds of conversation too painful to sustain. Zarghona is 71 years old. She retired from midwifery at 61 when her hands could no longer be trusted for the work they had done for 38 years. She lives alone in Kabul. She keeps the curtains drawn, not from fear exactly, from the particular tiredness of a woman who has looked at too much for too long and simply needs the view to be smaller for a while. She prays 5 times a day. She tends a small indoor garden, pots of herbs on a table near the window. The window she keeps curtained. The herbs grow in the indirect light. They manage. Some evenings, not every evening, but some, she allows herself to think about Tariq. Not about his absence, about the fact of him, that she kept him alive through all of it, that he exists in Germany with children of his own who have never heard an explosion and do not know to calibrate and flinch at things that are genuinely dangerous because they have never had to learn not to. That she made that possible, not through heroism, through 38 years of getting up every morning and doing the next necessary thing. On those evenings, she sits with that knowledge, just sits with it. And it is not peace exactly, but it is something. And sometimes, something is enough.